We are making, our maker's gonna make tote out of our Kimberbell tea towel blank. This is a really pretty ombre tea towel. And we're starting with part 1, creating the tote bag handles. The first thing that we want to do is turn our tea towel right side down, and we want to look for the corner that has the Kimberbell tag and this little white loop. You're going to take your scissors and just cut that loop out right along the seam. Next, you'll take your tea towel and fold it in half lengthwise. Now, we all know that sometimes when we purchase pre-made blanks or tea towels, things like that, but they aren't quite square. All I want you to focus on right now is matching up the 2 hemmed lengthwise edges. Don't worry about these smaller, shorter edges down here, whether or not they'll match up. We will square it up as we go. So we're going to take the 2 lengthwise hemmed edges, match them right up together. Then I'm going to place my tea towel on my cutting mat, getting it square. I will measure over 2 inches. Place my ruler. And we're going to cut a 2-inch strip all the way up the length of this tea towel. All right, step 1D. Take both of the strips and cut the hemmed edge off all 4 short ends. Step 2A. Take 1 2-inch strip and fold the long raw edge of the strip over 1/2 inch, wrong sides together, and press the fold. B, fold the strip in half lengthwise, wrong sides together, aligning the folded edges, and press well. C, match the bobbin thread to your top thread. Top stitch along both long sides of the strip with an 1/8 inch seam. 2D, repeat the direction steps 2A through 2C for the remaining strip. These will be the tote bag handles. We're now on part 2, centering the tea towel. We're going to take our tea towel that both of the long edges have been trimmed off. We're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, lining up that hemmed edge. Now, if you'll notice, mine is off just a tiny bit, so we're going to just kind of adjust it, get that grain to lay flat, and if you need to, go ahead and give it a little tug at the diagonals to stretch that grain back into place. All right, now I'm going to line up my tea towel on my cutting mat, and I want to measure so that I have 12.5 inches of tea towel left. So I'm going to square that up. Okay, place your ruler. Square up one side. All right, that's 13.25, so I need to trim off another. So now I'm going to trim this edge of the tea towel so that we want to make sure we trim off both edges so that we get this centerpiece for our tote good and square. So we trimmed off this side. I've measured down so that it's now 12.5 inches, and we'll go ahead and trim right along that line. Now our tea towel should be good and square, ready to use for our tote bag. Step 1B, unfold and lay the tea towel flat right side down. The dark color should be to the right. From the right, measure 1 inch from the hemmed edge of the tea towel. Using a water-soluble pen, mark a vertical line, then label this line A. 1C. From the right, measure 12 inches from the hemmed end of the tea towel. Using a water-soluble pen, mark a vertical line, label this line B. Step 2. Hoop Kimberbell Sticky Back Tearaway Stabilizer with the glossy paper side up. With the tip of scissors or scoring tool, score the stabilizer inside the perimeter of the hoop. Peel the glossy paper from the scored section, exposing the adhesive stabilizer. Step 3. Load the centering crosshairs embroidery file into the machine. Step 4. Change the thread to a visible color. Stitch the centering crosshairs directly on top of the stabilizer. Step 5. Fold the tea towel in half lengthwise, right sides together. Raw edges will be at the top and line A will be to your right. Finger press well along this fold. Step 6. Keeping the folded edge aligned, fold the towel to the left at line B. Finger press well along the fold. Step 7. Keeping the tea towel folded, align the folded edge B with the vertical crosshairs and the horizontal fold with the horizontal crosshairs. The tea towel will be hooped horizontally. Step 8. Unfold the tea towel. Smooth in place to adhere to the stabilizer. The dark color should be to the right. We're at part 3, embroidering the Maker's Gonna Make design. Step 1 is to load the embroidery file into the machine, which we've done. We changed our thread to the desired color and stitched the scissor placement line. Now we're going to take the scissor leather, place it right side up, making sure to completely cover that placement line. And we're going to tape it in place so that that leather doesn't slide around as we sew. And it's easier to remove if you tape outside the stitch line, if possible. If not, it will tear away out from under the design. Now we're going to go ahead and do step 1, part D, which is to stitch the scissors tack down line. All right, we have finished stitching the leather tack down line. Now we'll just remove our paper tape and we're going to trim the leather right along our tack down line. I'm going to use my snips for this, keeping my snips perpendicular, lifting the leather up and just trim right along that line. So we finished trimming up this scissor leather and getting that all nice and even. Then we moved on to step 4, stitch the dress stand and the placement line for the dress form. Now we're going to go ahead and take our fabric, place it completely covering that placement line and tape it in place. Now we'll go ahead and stitch the dress form tack down line. Now we're going to remove the tape, and I'm going to use my, if I can't get the tape unstuck, we're going to use my Kimberbell snips again, and we'll just trim that fabric close to the tack down line. And we want to make sure that we trim close on this one because our decorative stitch is not a full satin stitch outline, so the edges of the fabric may poke through if we don't trim it close enough. Step 5A, stitch the dress form decorative outline. Step 5B, change the thread to the desired color and stitch makers. 5C, change thread to desired color and stitch gonna. 5D, change thread to the desired color, stitch make. Step 6, remove the project from the hoop. Step 7, turn the project to the back and gently tear the stabilizer away from the design. All right, we are now on part 4, which is sewing the tote bag together. We've made our beautiful embroidery design. Look at how cute those silver leather scissors are. I love that. So now we are going to start with step 1 on part 4. We're going to fold the tea towel widthwise with the wrong sides together. So I'm going to flip this over so that my line A that I marked is at the top. We'll bring the bottom edge up and line it up right with that line A. Now, at this point, you're going to wonder what in the world we've done. Why is our embroidery on the back and looking like it's never going to fit on the front of our tote bag? Just trust us at this point. You're going to see as we go through how wonderful this is all going to be together. So just trust what I'm teaching you here and follow the directions and you'll have a beautiful tote bag. So we've lined up the bottom hem with line A, wrong sides together. Now I'm going to measure over from that fold 4 inches. Let me measure, make sure I get it in the correct place so it's straight. Okay, 4 inches. So I'm 4 inches from the fold over. And then I'm going to use my water-soluble pen and mark another line. This line is now going to be called our center stitch line. So when we refer to that in the instructions, you'll know we're talking about this line. We're going to match our bobbin thread to our top thread, and this is now on step 2, and we're going to sew through both layers of the tea towel right along that center stitch line. This is creating a flap for the pocket on our tote bag. So we'll take this to the machine. You'll probably want to pin it together first, just so we make sure we keep that nice and straight. And then we'll sew right along that stitch line. All right, this was step 2. We sewed a straight line down that center stitch line that we marked, and we've used a little dark thread here so you can see that. Then I went ahead and did step 3, and I flipped the project over so that the design was on top, and I sewed a top stitch right along that fold right there to give this what's eventually going to be our pocket on our tote that really nice finished edge. So just a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. That takes us through step 3. Now we're on step 4. We're going to open the tea towel horizontally with the right side up. And I'm going to put the dark side, oops, I've got it backwards, dark side to the right with the flap for the embroidery design on the top should be pointing to the left. So dark side here to the right, the flap to the left. Now on step 5, we're going to measure 4 inches to the right side of this center stitch line. And we'll use our water-soluble marking pen. Lined right up. So 4 inches over from our center line. Use your water-soluble pen and mark another line right there. And we're going to label that one C. Now I want to measure to the right of line C 1 inch. And I'm going to draw another line, and we'll mark that one as D. So now I have a line 4 inches down from the center stitch line, and then a line 1 inch away from that line. Now this is a lot of marking, but it's going to end up getting your lines for your tote nice and straight. So make sure you take the time to measure and mark those correctly. Now we're going to measure down on step 5C from this top corner 2.5 inches, and I'm going to draw a line over here to connect to line D. So I'm going to line the bottom of my tea towel up with the grids on my ruler. Then I'm going to take my ruler and line it up at the 2.5 inch mark here along the edge of that tea towel and the grids of my ruler, and draw a line from line D right over to the edge. And this one I will mark as line E. And now you're going to do the same thing down here at the bottom. Come up 2.5 inches and draw a line over to line D. So keep that tea towel straight on your grid. Line your ruler up at the 2.5 inch line. Okay, and then we want to draw across from line D to the edge of the hem and mark that as line F. All right, now we have lines C, D, E, and F all marked out on our tote. We're going to step 6A, and I'm going to take my tea towel and fold it along line C. And I'm going to just finger press right along that line. Get a good crease. All right, we've finger pressed line C and gotten a good fold in that. Now we're going to take that fold and line C and line it up directly with line D, making a pleat in our fabric. Make sure it's good and straight right along line D, and then go ahead and finger press along that fold line underneath. All right, now I've created a little pleat in my fabric. Line C is along this fold, line D is lined up directly underneath that. We're going to align one handle with this line F. So I'm going to take the edge of the handle, stick it underneath that pleat we just made, and line it up directly on top of line F so it's nice and straight. And then I'm going to fold this flat back over the top where we made our little pleat. See that? Flip it down right over the top, and I'm going to pin it in place. And then I want to stick another pin up here at the top to hold that strap good and secure. And then I'm going to double check it. Just lay it flat and make sure it looks like it's nice and even across there. Okay, so I'm keeping my strap, making sure that the right side up that I have pinned here stays up all the way around it. I'm going to line the top edge of the strap up with line E and tuck the end of it under the flap. So right here, my top edge is lined with E. I'm going to fold the flap over the end of the strap, making sure it's nice and straight. Then we're going to go ahead and pin that one in place so it's good and secure. Pin it again up here at the top, making sure that it has stayed aligned with line E. And we've got the line C folded over the tops of our ends of our straps so they're all finished and hidden in that pleat. The pins holding the strap into place. Now I'm going to go to step 7C. We're going to top stitch right along the top stitching that is already on this strap line. We're going to start at the top hem. Make sure you back stitch to secure these. Where these are handles, you need that sturdiness there. So back stitch at the beginning, follow that top stitching all the way down over the top of line C, and here in back stitch, over the top of the flap formed by line C, and back stitch. Then we'll do the same thing on this side of the strap, back stitching, top stitch right over that top stitch that's already there, go over the flap and to back stitch here. We'll do the same thing to both sides of that strap. So go ahead and take that to your machine and get those sewn. All right, we have completed step 7B. I took my bag to the machine and I top stitched right over the edge of the fold of line C. I went right over the straps and tacked all of that down into place. Then I went to step 7C and top stitched right over the top stitch that was already on those straps from the edge of the hem right down to fold C, making sure to back stitch at the beginning and end to make sure those are good and secure on those handles. So we did all 4 sides of each of those straps. Now we're on step 8A. It says to reinforce the handle by sewing a rectangle with an X in the center where each handle meets the top of the tea towel. So I'm going to draw that on here just so that you can see what that means. I'm going to take this to my machine and stitch right like this, making a rectangle. Then I'm going to stitch an X right through the center of the rectangle on both of these handles, right up even with that hemmed edge. That's going to give us extra security on that handle for the weight that the tote bag will hold. So it will have that rectangle with an X stitched right in the middle. And we'll sew that on our machine. We just finished step 8A and sewed our rectangle with the X in the center to reinforce our straps. Now we're going to move to step 8B. We're going to lay the tea towel flat horizontally, right side up, with the dark side to your right. And we're going to take the flap with our embroidery design on it and fold it towards that right side so that you don't see the design. We're going to line it back up on our cutting mat here, and we're going to measure from our center stitching line right here over to the left 3.5 inches, and then we're going to draw a line. So I'm going to line that center line up right on one of the grid marks on my cutting mat. I'll measure over 3.5 inches with my water soluble pen. Draw my line. This is line G. Now we're going to mark for the straps on this side of our bag. So we'll do the exact same thing we did on the other side by measuring down 2.5 inches. So I've placed my ruler so that the 2.5 inch line is here, and I'll draw a line right across there with my water soluble pen and end at line G. Alright, so I've lined my 2.5 inch line up with the edge of the tea towel. I'm going to mark with my water soluble pen right along that ruler till I get to line G, and I'm going to label this line as H. Now we'll come to the bottom of the tea towel, measure up 2.5 inches, draw another line from the hem to line G, and label that line as I. So now we have our center stitch line. We've drawn line G 3.5 inches away, come down 2.5 inches from the top, marked line H, come up 2.5 inches from the bottom, and marked line I. Now we're going to step 9B. We're going to lay the straps the same way that we did with the other side. And I'm going to make sure that I lay them so that the same color of strap is on the same side of the bag. So this was my white edge of my tea towel. I'm going to make sure that the white is directly across from it. Here's my teal end of the tea towel. Make sure the teal end is directly across from it. Make sure that you keep the same right side up all the way around that strap. I'm going to take the top edge of the white side and line it directly up with line H, and the bottom of it line directly with line G. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Line up the outside edge of the strap with line I and the bottom edge with line G. And then I will pin those so that they don't move. I'm going to pin them at the top. You can pin them down at the bottom if you'd like, but we're going to fold this strap back up, or the flap back up over those, and pin that in place. So I'm just going to pin at the top right now to make it easier for me to fold that flap. Okay, so now we're on step 9D. We're going to flip the flap over to the left, covering the bottom of those straps. And then I'm going to take my ruler and place it right along the edge of this top stitching on the strap. All right, I'm laying my ruler right along the top stitching for that strap. And it helps if you stand up on this one so that you can see exactly where you're marking. I'm going to draw a line right from the bottom of the top stitching here along that flap till we get to the center stitching line here. Just like that. So there's a line from the top stitching straight down to the center stitch line. Do the same thing with the next top stitched line on that strap. Draw a line. We'll move down to the second strap. Do the exact same thing, following that top stitch line right to the center stitching line. Okay, now we're going to pin that, we're on step 10. We're going to pin that flap in place. I'm going to put a pin right at the top of the flap holding the strap in place. Another one here. Making sure those stay lined up. Pin it in place. And then I'm going to put another couple pins along that fold just to make sure it stays where I want it. So now I have my lines drawn from the top stitching to the center stitching line on all 4 places on that strap. Now you're going to take it to your machine and start here at the top hemmed edge of the tea towel and stitch right over the top of that top stitching, remembering to back stitch for reinforcement. So all the way down till you get to the center stitching line, and you'll do that on all 4 strap lines, and that will take you through the end of step 11. We just went ahead and did step 12, which was to sew the triangles with the X through to reinforce the straps exactly as you did on the other side. On step 13, we're going to finish off our bag with some French seams. So French seams are really nice seams that finish both the outside and the inside of the seams so that you don't have any raw edge of fabric showing. It's a great way to finish off bags, especially where you'll be seeing the inside often. So we're going to fold the tea towel in half with wrong sides together to make a French seam. This seems backwards from sewing a normal seam, and it is, but you'll understand as we go. And then we're going to go ahead and pin those sides together, keeping them nice and even. And I would go ahead and put a pin at the top of this pocket flap to hold it in place as you sew. And then go ahead and do the other side the same way. On step 14, stitch down each side of that bag using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and sew down both sides 1/4 of an inch, and that will finish you through step 14. All right, we are on step 14. We have stitched both sides of the bag on the right side, and we did that at 1/4 of an inch. Then I went ahead and took my ruler and rotary cutter and trimmed each of these sides down to 1/8 of an inch. And then we're going to take the tote and turn it so that it's wrong side out. And the reason we trimmed those seams down to that 1/8 of an inch was to make sure that we have all those edges that can fray inside our French seam, and that none of those threads will be showing or sticking out. I'm going to take my blunt edge and poke those corners to get those squared up. Being careful not to poke through my seam. You're then going to smooth that seam out right along that edge. Take it to your iron and press it well, and we'll do that on both sides. Remember, we have the wrong side out. Our design is on the inside. We're going to even those seams out and press the bag really well. That finishes out step 14. Then with the wrong sides out, we're going to go to our sewing machine and stitch down each side one more time at 1/4 of an inch from the edge to finish off that French seam. Okay, so finishing out step 15, we went to the machine, sewed 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and we've created that nice finished seam on the inside of our bag with a beautiful French seam with clean edges. Now to finish off step 15, we're going to turn the tote to the right side. And again, we can poke those corners out with the blunt tip to make sure they look nice and square. Again, being careful not to poke through your seam. Now I can take my project to the iron, press it so it's nice and smooth, all the wrinkles are out, and you can go ahead and spray your inked lines and letters that we marked on the bag with some water to remove that ink. Lay it flat to dry. You could press again if you choose. There we go. Our Maker's Gonna Make tote is all finished. Look at how cute that is. You've got 3 pockets across the front and the beautiful finished French seams on the inside. Isn't that a great project?